Hello and welcome to the briefing room. My name is Trang Nguyen. I'm the head of international programs and engagement at Climateworks Centre. And today we are exploring the place-based approaches to reducing emission from industry, in particular through what we at Climateworks call the Net Zero Industrial Precincts, or NZIP for short. But first, let me begin by acknowledge the traditional owner of the land of which we are dialing today. I acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land and water of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to the elders past and present, and extend my respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander joining today. Please feel free to use the chat to tell us where you are dialing in from. As I mentioned, today we are discussing our work on net zero industrial precincts. So let me start by just to highlight what is a net zero industrial precinct. It is a cluster of industrial businesses with access to renewable energy in the form of clean electricity, hydrogen, and heat through shared enabling infrastructure. NZIPs are supported by integrated green supply chain, guided by nature positive planning and coordinated government investment aligned with net zero pathway. That's the very high level definition, but there is no one size fits all blueprint for NZIP. The strength of NZIPs lies in the place-based approach that reflect local industry, governance, funding models, and the community need. And among all this, localization is key. Success requires tailored solution, not a rigid framework. NZIP are emerging as a transformative model for industrial decarbonization, and they are gaining traction internationally. And that's what we at Climateworks observing through coordinating efforts across Australia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So over the next hour, you will hear from some of our key people involved in that work. My colleagues, first of all, Giwangkara will take you through our work in Indonesia. My colleague Ben Khuat will look at our work in Ho Chi Minh City and Vietnam. And Hugh Sheehan will detail our analysis of Gladstone in Queensland, Australia. We will be taking your questions at the end, so please keep them coming through the Q&A session on your Zoom screen. So now let's kick off with our first speaker, Egy. Egy Giwangkara is our newly appointed country lead in Indonesia. Before appointed to this role, Egy was our program impact manager in Climateworks Centre, Indonesia team, and having many years of leading energy transformation and industrial decarbonization programs across Indonesia and the region. Over to you, Egy.
Thanks for the kind intro, Trang. I'll begin my grounding the power of place in Indonesia's context by walking you through what is NZIP in Indonesia, how we built a country-tailored framework, and the results of the establishment phase, and what's next from NZIP Indonesia. And let's begin with the why places matter for achieving net zero industry. So historically, industry facilities started as a single, built according to resource-dependent locations or infrastructure-based selection. Throughout time, Indonesian government then established a dedicated industrial area to provide economies of scale and concentrated services. And in fact, in Indonesia, the government enacted these mandatory regulations just a decade ago, since 2015. NZIPs takes the next step by connecting and clustering the industry estates with neighboring industry facilities. This spatial clustering will capture scale, pull demand, and the coordination needed to decarbonize our industries at pace. An industry precinct has three reinforcing components. First, it consists of decarbonization projects that focusing on how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions at scale. And second, it's also a safe, efficient, and connected clean energy distribution system, including heat. and more importantly, enabling ecosystems of coordinated policy, collective innovations, and workforce and community engagement that keep projects feasible and socially acceptable. We acknowledge that the term industry precinct in Indonesia is relatively new. However, having these reinforcing components will enable rapid decarbonizations in Indonesia's industries, especially with precinct that has an industry park or estate in which also operate as a special economic zone, like the Java Integrated Industrial and Ports Estate, or JIPE in Gresik Precinct. We'll see the details later. To find good NZIP candidates in the country, we ran a nationwide screening. We assessed thousands of industrial sites using a robust and co-developed multi-criteria approach with the Ministry of Industry team. The NZIP Indonesia framework has three main steps. The first one, an industry and geographic assessment to get along the long list of 20 candidate precincts. Second, a deeper technical assessment for about 19 technical parameters to filter the 20 into 10 precincts. And the last one is a stakeholder assessment that comprise of 27 stakeholder ambitions and readiness questions to get into 5 precincts. That is why the 5 sites that you will see next are not random. They pass both technical and readiness filters. Here's the 5 shortlisted industry precincts around the country as one of the results of NZIP Indonesia establishment phase. As you can see on the map, 3 industry precincts are located within Java Island, while the rest are in Sulawesi and Maluku. Each sites give us a different set of technical, governance, and finance ground tests. That is why exactly we need to design a replicable NZIP solution across the country. Let's now walk through quickly one by one. First is Cilegon Precinct that represents iron and steel industries. So this precinct has one industry estate represented by Krakatau Industrial Estate Cilegon and 2 major steel producers, including Krakatau Steel and Krakatau Poskro as neighboring actor industry. Hence, the key decarbonization opportunities from these precincts lies on the electrifications of the industry, steel industry in particular, with shared electric arc furnace facility, for examples. Moving on, this is a Gresik precinct, a precinct that consists of 3 close proximity and large industrial scale estates, which is the Maspion in Gresik Industrial Park, as well as JIPE, as I mentioned earlier. Another 2 actors nearby are Petrokimia Gresik and Ispat Indo. These industry clusters perhaps a good test for shared utilities and maybe using hydrogen pathways to fulfill the decarbonizations of ammonia and steel industries. Next is Morowali Precinct, a very large-scale, multi-gigawatt captive coal capacity now, and an integrated nickel and steel downstreaming processing. This is an opportunity to pilot grid-scale renewables and also decarbonize ferroalloys roads within these precincts. Next is Tuban Precincts, represents established cement capacity and existing estate infrastructure, which will be useful for low-emission fuel substitutions, efficiency retrofits within cement operations, and maybe a shared clean heat that can be also best place to build in this Tuban precincts. And the last one is Halmahera Precinct. It is a combination of nickel and plant steel park, similar to the Morowali one, with planned large power developments. So this is also another good test ground on how to align new power build decisions with net zero investment lies on this. Now, we are moving from framework development into evidence-based pathways development to deliver what a net zero industry precinct in Indonesia could look like. Each site, as I mentioned earlier, each site will give us a different sets of technical, governance, and finance And this is something that we will do within the next 2 to 3 years ahead. I think that's pretty much from our end, Trang, and back to you, back to you again, Trang.
Thank you so much, Eggy. And it was really interesting to hear how you and colleagues came up with a list of 5 feasible places for NZIP pilot. And that's from a very long list of 31,000 sole actors in 130 industrial estates in Indonesia. And the most important thing is that these precincts not only have a very strong potential for industrial decarbonization, but also they are in the sectors that are economically and socially very important to the Indonesia economy, for example, steel, cement, etc. So thank you so much, Eggy. Now let's bring in our second speaker. Ben Khuat is a policy manager at Climateworks Centre, and he leads the organization's policy engagement with Vietnamese stakeholders and advancing Vietnam's net zero goals and fostering Australia and Vietnam collaboration on decarbonization. Over to you, Ben, to share your work in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam.
Thanks, Trang and team, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Khuat, and I'm very pleased to be here today to present our early work in Vietnam. So let's begin. Vietnam has pledged to reach net zero by 2050. And since the last 40 years after the major economic reform in the 80s, the country has successfully built up a dynamic economy that is based on exports and has become one of the most dynamic manufacturing centers in Asia. Ho Chi Minh City is the country's largest economic hub and has been a pioneer in Vietnam's industrialization and economic development. Over the past year, we at Climateworks Centre has worked closely with the city government and its industry partners to explore how NZIPs could take shape here. So what's the opportunity? NZIPs aren't just about cutting emissions. It's about structural economic transformation as well. Climate action can strengthen Vietnam's competitiveness in exports and attracting foreign investments, and thus support the country's economic growth. Vietnam is part of what many call the new industrial Sun Belt, countries stretching from India to South Asia that are becoming the clean energy engines of global manufacturing. Industries are moving away from high-cost, high-emission regions to places abundant with renewable potential and workforces. And Vietnam has almost all the ingredients: a solid export base, young labor force, and solar and green resources. So why Ho Chi Minh City? Contrasting to our top-down approach in Indonesia, in Vietnam, we started with a specific region, Ho Chi Minh City. Before the merger with Bình Dương and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, the city already generated about a quarter of Vietnam's annual GDPs and 20% of the total emission. It has 17 industrial zones, employing over 250,000 workers and producing more than $10 billion in exports every year. This doesn't include Saigon High-Tech Park, which alone export 20 billion last year. They are home to global players such as Samsung, Intel, Apple suppliers, and major textile exporters. And all of them are under pressure of global buyers to decarbonize. The strategic merger will expand the city even more in both industrial and economic terms. And together, they will account for a third to 40% of the nation's economy in the next 5 to 10 years. So for Ho Chi Minh City, decarbonizing its industrial sectors is crucial to stay part of the global supply chain. Now, what does that look like in practice? So from our analysis of the 5 major industrial zones, namely Saigon High-Tech Park, Đông Nam, Tân Tạo, Tân Thuận, and Hiệp Phước, which account for more than 70% of the total energy consumption of all industry zones in Ho Chi Minh City. The majority of the energy consumption from the key energy users here comes from the national electricity grid, ranging from 89 to 99%. Please keep in mind that this analysis is extrapolated from the energy consumption data of key energy users that indicate the main energy consumption structure in these zones. So these findings tell us two things. First, most industries here are more downstream manufacturing, ranging from electronics, textile, pharmaceuticals, plastic, finished steels, and cement products. They are not as heavy processes as in the north and central Vietnam. And you can see from the graph, some zones are more sector dominated and some are more diversified. The biggest sectors in Ho Chi Minh cities are electronics, textile, and followed by steel and cement construction, the finished products. Second, decarbonization of the grid is crucial for Vietnam. So right now, the fossil fuel, mainly coal and gas, still make up around 40–45% of Vietnam power generation. That's the big challenge, but also the big opportunity for Vietnam to promote renewable energy uptake. So the country has set out the goal to reduce its reliance on fossil fuel. By 2030, coal will account for 13 to 16 of total electricity generation, substituted by solar and wind power, which are projected to account for 31 and 15% respectively, according to the newly revised Power Development Plan 8. For industrial zones, there are two ways: on-site deployment with solar power or leveraging a direct power purchase agreement, a mechanism that enables direct transaction between power generators and buyers. Vietnam has been working on this recently and had very optimistic results. For example, Lego had signed the first large-scale renewable DPPA in Bình Dương to support its 100% renewable energy factory. And Samsung at Saigon High-Tech Park has just installed 28 megawatt of rooftop solar and meeting a quarter of the company's need, and it aims for 100% renewable power in coming years. These are only but important steps toward industrial energy transformation. So let's talk about the levers that can be used to decarbonize each sector, and every sector has its own pathway. It can be renewable energy uptake, or improving energy efficiency, or improving the manufacturing process with electrification or fuel switching. So in iron and steel, as production focuses on recycling and downstream processing at Hiệp Phước and Tân Thuận, the priorities will be upgrading the furnaces, improving the efficiency, electrifying rolling and reheating, and shifting toward wind steel with electric arc furnaces or direct reduced iron, powered by renewables or hydrogen. In cement, reducing clinker used with supplementary cementitious materials and electrify grinding through rooftop solars or leveraging DPPA will be the priorities. In vehicles and machinery, the levers are renewable energy uptake for the source of energy and switching to low carbon materials. In plastics, the focus is on electrifying molding and extrusion, expanding recycling and developing bioplastics. For textile and footwear, the shift is from diesel boilers to solar thermal or electric system, combined with circular materials and renewable power. We have tools like the Hitch Index that help the suppliers and manufacturers to show their credible progress. And in electronics, zones like Saigon High-Tech Park are adopting DPPAs and smart and digital energy management for improving their efficiency. So together, these sector-specific pathways form the backbone of a credible industrial transition, which is practical, tailored, and hopefully scalable. So to make this transformation real, we need a system to support it. So in our recommended roadmap for Ho Chi Minh City, we set out 5 foundational pillars as the building blocks to turn ambition into action. The first one, coordination and skills. This is about implementing effective cross-sectoral governance mechanisms and strengthening institutional capacity across sectors. A steering committee, such as a net zero task force at city level, can bring all stakeholders from local government, think tanks, business association, zone developers and tenants, and even more financiers together to coordinate pilot programs, guide policies, and align their investments. Over time, this also builds institutional capacity, embedding the sustainability in education and reskilling workers for clean tech jobs. The second pillar, which is the enabling infrastructure. We need a physical system, physical infrastructure that allows industry to decarbonize. We are talking about renewable power, low carbon transport, green hydrogen or heat recovery. So short-term actions, including scaling rooftop solar, piloting DPPAs, and developing shared hydrogen and storage facilities at Hiệp Phước. The third pillar, decarbonizing existing industries. By this pillar, we are hoping to help factories upgrade their process, upgrade their efficiencies through electrification and integrating emission accounting, linking with low carbon public procurement to promote the demand. So right now, Hiệp Phước is testing green steel and low clinker cement. The fourth pillar, attracting new clean industries. So we try to bringing in innovative zero emission sectors, such as electric vehicles, hydrogens, and circular manufacturing. And to do that, we will need supportive policies and fiscal incentives. So we would like to see Dong Nam can transform to be a clean tech hub, Tân Thuận can be a green logistics base, and Saigon High Tech Park can be a net zero innovation zone. And last one, the cross-cutting enabler, which is one of the most important factors for Vietnam, which is finance and inclusion. We hope to unlock the capital through green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, public-private partnerships, and hopefully JETP finance, while ensuring the fair transition that benefits both workers and the communities. So together, these 5 pillars form a coordinated roadmap for Ho Chi Minh City that can pioneer Vietnam net zero industrial precincts, combining the leaderships, investment, and the partnerships to turn vision into action. To conclude, Ho Chi Minh cities represent both the challenge and the promise of Vietnam net zero journey. It's an economic powerhouse and one of the largest emission source of the countries. So through NZIPs, the city can show that industrial growth and decarbonization can move toward together. And the lessons from here can extend nationwide, helping Vietnam build a network of green, competitive, and resilient industrial regions. As we move into the next phase, our focus will be scaling the pilots, deepening the partnerships, and mobilizing for finance options to turn the first steps into lasting transformations. Thank you so much for listening, and back to you, Trang.
Thank you, Ben. So your presentation also demonstrated 5 shortlisted candidates in net zero industrial zones for Ho Chi Minh City. And like in the case of Indonesia, these zones are not just important in decarbonization solutions, but also have a lot of imperatives in social, economic, and investment attraction as well. But the sectors that you came up with are probably quite different than what we found in Indonesia. So for example, in addition to steel and cement, you also got some other sectors such as textile and electronic device, which are very important to the economy of the country. And this really reflects the importance of a place-based approach that we keep highlighting and emphasizing. So hi everyone, if you just joined us, welcome to Climateworks Centre briefing room, where we are talking about net zero industrial precincts and how they are emerging as a powerful model for place-based industrial decarbonization. My name is Trang Nguyen. I'm the head of international program and engagement at Climateworks Centre. And so far we have heard from my colleagues, Giwangkara and Ben Khuat. And now I would like to welcome my colleague Hugh Sheehan, Hugh is a Program Impact Manager with Climateworks Centre industry team, and he brings a background of energy engineering consulting and emission reduction strategy to the role. He has many years advising government, university, and corporates across sectors, including industrials, utilities, and primary production. Over to you, Hugh, to share your experience working on Gladstone transition in Australia.
Thanks, Trang, for the lovely introduction. And hi, everyone. It's fantastic to have you with us today. I'm looking forward to sharing a glimpse of what we've been working on around NZIPs in Australia. So over the last 2 years and continuing into the future, we have held a focus on Gladstone transitioning to an NZIP, and we have released 2 reports this year. The first considers the opportunities and requirements for Gladstone to become a clean manufacturing hub, and the second, hot off the press a week or 2 ago, hones in on low carbon heat and industrial flexibility to future-proof Gladstone industries. Today, I'm going to take you through some of what we've found so far working on a Gladstone Net Zero Industrial Precinct. So when we think about industrial decarbonisation in Australia, there's no better place to start than Gladstone. It's one of the country's most productive industrial regions, home to alumina refineries, aluminium smelters, LNG facilities, and a major export port that connects Australia to global markets. Gladstone's combination of industrial scale, port access, and proximity to renewable energy zones makes it a natural candidate for an NZIP. What makes Gladstone especially interesting is that it already has the ingredients for collective decarbonisation. The industries here share infrastructure, workforce, and supply chains. That means if we plan and invest together, rather than site by site or project by project, we can decarbonise faster, more efficiently, and create a stronger regional economy. Gladstone represents the power of place, showing how coordinated regional action can deliver national and global impact. Firstly, we've found significant opportunities for Gladstone as a potential supplier of the products the world will need as it moves towards a low-carbon global economy. Gladstone could capitalise on the growing demand for products like low-carbon ammonia and aluminium, with several globally competitive advantages already in place, such as those I mentioned on the previous slide. The region's extensive renewable energy resources, its port, as well as the existing skilled workforce. And these are advantages not to be sneezed at, and by leveraging such existing strengths through an NZIP model, Gladstone could become a flagship for Australia's low-carbon industrial exports, showing how coordinated place-based action can drive both economic growth and emissions reduction. Of course, while the opportunities are significant, real challenges remain in unlocking them. And we'll get to some of those challenges a little later, but we know the transition will require low-cost, near-zero emissions electricity to be available at scale and at pace, as well as substantial capital investment to enable competitive low-carbon production. If decarbonisation is too slow or energy costs remain high, Gladstone risks losing market share and missing both corporate and government emissions reduction targets. Action is needed now to ensure Gladstone remains competitive as the world decarbonises. So, as I mentioned, a key factor is access to renewable energy to provide electricity, industrial heat, and alternative feedstocks. Taking a place-based approach allows you to better anticipate a region's future energy needs. And this is what we did in our first Gladstone report. By considering each industry's potential and ambitions for decarbonisation, we were able to show long-term energy needs. As you can see in the chart, by 2040, Gladstone could need up to 7 times the electricity it used in 2022. This more granular analysis can complement the top-down whole-of-system modelling that the Australian Energy Market Operator, or AEMO, does as part of their energy system planning for Australia's main grid. This is important as our findings far exceed what is currently anticipated in AEMO's integrated system plan. Meeting this demand will require a coordinated regional approach of the kind that can be enabled by the NZIP framework, one that aligns industrial planning, transmission investment, and renewable generation to secure the region's low-carbon future. An integrated NZIP approach can optimise the regional energy system and aggregate industrial demand, reducing the scale of generation, storage, and transmission needed, and helping bridge the gap between today's electricity supply and future low-carbon demand. In our analysis, we found that much of this new electricity demand comes from the need for industrial heat, supplied either directly through electric technologies or indirectly through hydrogen-based fuels. Our latest work, released less than 2 weeks ago, explores in great depth what decarbonisation could look like in Gladstone. It builds on the opportunities and recommendations we identified in our first report on the vision of what it will take for Gladstone to become an NZIP, showing how key technologies could be applied across Gladstone's major industries: alumina and aluminium, cement and lime, chemicals, and hydrogen production. The chart here shows how this could unfold. Fossil fuels phasing out through the late 2020s, hydrogen, electrification, and biomass scaling up through the 2030s, and by 2040, many of Gladstone industries running on clean electricity, hydrogen, and sustainable fuels. This can achieve around a 79% reduction in industrial emissions. The analysis highlights a handful of critical technologies driving this transition: electrification of industrial heat using electric boilers and thermal energy storage, hydrogen and sustainable biomass for high temperature processes, and industrial flexibility, where plants adjust operations to align with renewable supply. A key component of industrial flexibility is thermal storage, which works by converting electricity into heat when power is cheapest, then releasing it later for industrial use, allowing facilities to avoid costly peak periods. This kind of demand response capability could reduce peak electricity demand in Gladstone by about 2 gigawatts and help more than double Australia's overall grid flexibility by 2040, potentially saving industries millions of dollars and improving grid reliability. The key message is that Gladstone's transition won't rely on a single technology or sector. It's about coordinated action across multiple industries, supported by shared infrastructure and flexible energy systems that make low-carbon production both viable and competitive. So Gladstone has the ingredients to be a cornerstone of Australia's low-carbon industry, but turning that potential into reality isn't simple. The main barriers aren't about technology, they're about coordination, aligning demand, infrastructure, policy, and investment. And these barriers are complex and include things like missing demand certainty for low-carbon products and commodities, infrastructure delivery gaps, energy costs, regulatory complexity, and resource constraints. And while these are all complex problems, this is where the NZIP model can add a lot of value, treating Gladstone as one integrated system so complex challenges become solvable through collaboration. Now, I won't have time to go through all of the barriers in detail, so I'll just focus on 2. And I'm happy to discuss any others in more detail during the Q&A. The first I'd like to discuss links to renewable energy findings from our first report, and that's the infrastructure delivery gap. Currently, only around 12% of approved renewable capacity is being built, and transmission constraints limit large-scale electrification. Here, an NZIP approach can bring together energy planners, industry and governments to align renewable energy zone development with industrial demand through regional integrated system plans. The second links to findings from our latest report, and that's the issue of energy cost competitiveness. Driven by rising electricity, labour and construction costs that are squeezing Gladstone's and other regions' manufacturing competitiveness. We see that NZIPs can coordinate flexible energy use, shared infrastructure and demand management tools like electrothermal storage to reduce costs and improve reliability. Demand management and industrial flexibility can help avoid costly infrastructure overbuild by enabling a more effective use of renewable energy. So to finish, the challenges, they aren't insurmountable, they are coordination problems, and an NZIP approach provides a structure and partnerships Gladstone needs to turn barriers into pathways for regional decarbonisation and economic renewal. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Hugh. And this work that you presented really emphasized how Gladstone transition can deliver not just regional impact in Australia, but also a global impact through the scale of green commodities and also the opportunities and complexities of the transition that requires coordinated a lot of action among different stakeholders through an NZIP is a model to do that. Now we are going to open up for questions from the audience. I do see 2 questions in the chat box and probably for Aggie and Hugh later on. But before getting into those questions, I do really want to touch on one of the a very important issue that normally being mentioned a lot in the energy transition context, which is just transition. And this is very important on especially in the South Asia context, but I know that it's also very well discussed in Australia as well. I'll probably ask Aggie, in your view. So in Indonesia, we know that just transition is a very critical imperative. So how do you think the principle of a just transition can be integrated into NZIP concept?
Thanks for the questions, Trang. And yes, just transition is central for Indonesia's decarbonization journey, especially as the just transitions in the energy sectors has been emerging. Now, I think it's also a turn for industry sectors to start preparing and working on these just transition principles for industrial transformations. So for us, the NZIP approach is actually one of the most practical vehicles to operationalize just transitions, because it works at a place-based scale where economic, social, and environmental systems intersect. So I have 3 ways to unpack this briefly. The first one, how to protect and creating local livelihoods. So NZIP can ensure that workers and surrounding communities are not left behind when industries decarbonize. Second, it could be also managing socio-environmental co-benefits. By clustering industries and planning transitions collectively, we can better manage shared issues like local air quality, waste, and land use pressures. And last one, maybe through NZIP, it will also enabling inclusive and participatory ownership, because it brings together local governments, state operators, state-owned enterprises, and local communities through a shared platform for this social dialogue.
Thanks, Aggie. That's a great segue to the question that Tia mentioned in the chat box, that what is the Indonesian government's appetite to the developing NZIP in Indonesia, and do you see any barriers but also opportunity around the progressing of the concept?
Yeah, so for the barriers, probably about this is a new concept for Indonesian constituent. So the success is depend on the framing this opportunity, probably not as a climate challenge opportunity, but also as an economic and competitiveness opportunity in which can be tailored to prioritize local issues. So I think this is also an emerging opportunity for Indonesia to leapfrog the approach from, for example, industry states approach that might lose some of the opportunity in aggregating demands, etc., as Hugh mentioned in the presentations.
Thank you, Aggie. Hugh, now I turn to you for a pre-submitted question first. So I think you sort of alluded a little bit in the presentation, but how do you see the interplay between bioenergy and NZIPs, in particular, in regarding to the timing to meet the Australia 2035 emission target?
Thanks, Trang. It's an interesting question. It's definitely topical. Like many of the industries we engage with speak to the role of bioenergy in their decarbonisation pathways. And we do see that it can play an important complementary role in supporting NZIPs and helping meet emissions reductions targets. Mainly, well, particularly we see it as a transitional fuel, while renewable electricity and green hydrogen scales up. Both fuels, such as biomass and biomethane, are to a degree readily available to deploy and can substitute directly for coal and natural gas in industrial heat applications with minimal modifications for existing assets. And so in the near term, the strategic use of these fuels can help industries cut emissions quickly. For example, through co-firing in cement and lime or replacing natural gas in alumina and chemicals production. However, we've got to consider the feedstock availability and proximity of that feedstock to where it's needed. And that can constrain deployment. In regions like Gladstone, local sawmill and agricultural waste streams can only meet a small fraction of industrial demand, for example, and there's competition for those same feedstocks as well for other sectors such as aviation for sustainable aviation fuels. So whilst bioenergy is a valuable bridging option that can accelerate progress in the near term, meeting long-term decarbonisation goals will require complementary investment in renewable electricity, hydrogen, and coordinated infrastructure planning to ensure we can achieve net zero targets.
Thanks, Hugh. And Ben, you mentioned in the report in Vietnam that around 89% to 99% of the industrial energy come from the grid. So how can these zones decarbonize when the grid still runs on non-renewables, a proportion of that?
Thanks, Trang, for the question. Yes, this issue is quite crucial when we do the analysis. So around 90 to 99% of the industrial energies come from national grid. And it is true that more than 40% of the national electricity generated still come from generations are still coming from coal and gases. But this is also the reason why precinct level solutions are critical. So our approach focuses on 3 layers. The first one is on-site renewables. So installing, deploying new rooftop solars and shared solar parks within the precinct will be the first solution to reduce the reliance on the national grid. And the second one, which is quite an innovative one, which is the offsite sourcing through direct power purchase agreements. This matter has been fostered very quickly and strongly in Vietnam for the last 2 years, and we've seen some of the very big examples like Lego and some other companies. So, and the third layers will be the national grid decarbonization through power development plans number 8 and the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which will be more nation scale and will be large scale. So the precincts will act as the only adopters and the proof points demonstrating how clean power integration can happen ahead of the national scale change while reducing the grid dependencies in the long term. And these approaches are absolutely aligning with the National Power Development Plan, where the target to 2030 is to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels and enlarge the shares of renewable in the mix. So as I mentioned in the presentation, solar and wind will account for 30 and 15% respectively in 2030, and the coal will reduce its shares to around 13 to 16% only. So it's on the way.
Thank you, Ben. In the interest of time, I'll probably pick one of the questions that can be applied to all 3 geographies. So Kevin did ask, probably I'll hand over to you first, and then Aggie and Ben. So are the energy costs and demand uncertainties barriers unique to Gladstone? And does Indonesia and Ho Chi Minh City also have the same challenges?
Thanks, Trang. Kevin, Yes, they are not unique to Gladstone. The energy cost competitiveness that I mentioned is not unique to any one sector and industry, and is felt across the Australian economy currently in investing in decarbonisation. And with demand uncertainty, and also to mention, I think I see the energy costs, the availability of firm renewable electricity is one of the, if not the major barrier to a lot of decarbonisation and investment in Australia. And so what we need to do a lot more work around that to bring that cost down and make projects more bankable and investable for industry, and also for the demand uncertainty. So I think that's linked to the energy cost and the bankability issue of projects for decarbonising. There is demand for low carbon products, and that exists, but it's only viable and present at certain price levels. So there's plenty of people that will want to buy green products, but only not if it's going to be at exorbitant price levels. So we've got to do work on that price gap and bring it down so that there's an acceptable green premium for buyers.
Thanks, Hugh. Eggy, would you like to add to that?
Yes, thanks. So yeah, I think it's a similar issues also arises in Indonesia's industrial decarbonizations, in the Indonesian decarbonizations, i.e. the renewable energy capital cost is relatively still high, while in Indonesia specific, the cost of electricity generated from the fossils are relatively cheaper or shadowly cheaper. So this is something that often not only for the industry actors itself, but also the new renewables power plants also often encounter. And in addition to the energy higher energy costs and so infrastructure cost, I think in Indonesia's that may be also applicable for the Vietnam context, in which maybe Ben will appeal more in detail later. The governance and perhaps the data gaps exist. So how to deal this, it's relatively also pivotal. And hence, we try to build a strong governance and also regulatory strong governance and regulatory private sector alignment is essential. So limited and inconsistent data would hopefully could be tackled. So another also ingredients is also early partnership and engagement with local stakeholders and decision makers is important to build trust and ensure smoother implementations for the NZIPs across sites in Indonesia. So that's pretty much my additions, Trang.
Thank you, Eggy. We are running out of time, so I'll probably just ask Ben. So can you share one important success factor do you think from the work in Ho Chi Minh City that might also work well in other countries?
Thanks, Trang, for your questions. Yeah, I think it's very tempting, always tempting to take what worked elsewhere and apply it to the new place. But in practice, every context is vastly different in every term. What succeeds in one country, one place, most of the time doesn't work in another place if it doesn't fit the local realities or build lasting capacity. So in Vietnam, we didn't rush into introducing the new concept right away. We took a step back and learned from the local institutions, governance, regulations, and built up relationships and trust with local stakeholders. So ultimately, they are the owner of the change. They are the key actors, and we are the enablers. So understanding the roles of different partners in the partnerships is very crucial. And we took good international practice and lessons, but shaped them into the Vietnamese context. In other words, local adaptation and contextualizing, testing, adjusting, and building local ownerships along the way is crucial. So if we need to stress what lesson that might work elsewhere, I think is a billion-dollar question. But in my opinion, we can replicate success by reinterpreting them, not try to copy and paste them. So, and we also need the patience to make the solution truly local.
Thank you very much, Ben. You just highlight the importance of a place-based approach, and Aggie also mentioned the importance of partnerships and building trust with ecosystem. And I saw in the chat box, there's some questions around like whether we are partnered with Beyond Zero Emission and other partners in the ecosystem, and I would and Hugh would agree with me that we absolutely collaborate very strongly with other organizations within the ecosystem, and we really look forward to continuing this collaboration and sharing knowledge with you and everyone joining the call today. That brings us to the end of our discussion, and I would like to thank you, our panel, Aggie Giwangkara, Ben Khuat, and Hugh Sheehan. Thank you all for your very interesting sharings on the findings of the work of 3 different locations. And I also would like to thank you to our team behind the scene, Amrit Bahara, Tyra Hongren, Owen Summers, Sophie and Simon. Thank you, team, for your work behind the scene and putting all these together. Thank you everyone for your time today, and you can find out more about our work and catch up on these previous briefing rooms at climateworkscentre.org, and we will send through a recording from this session and keep you updated on the latest news in the climate solutions, and all the Q&A questions that we have not been able to address today. We would love to follow up later on. Thank you everyone for your time, and look forward to seeing you next time.